If every dollar you earn is tied directly to the hours you put in, then your life will always be limited by the number of hours in a day. And here's the truth. You and I only get 24. No more, no less. That means if your entire financial system depends on your labor, on the sweat of your brow, you'll always be capped. You can work harder, sure. You can take a second job, maybe even a third, but all you're really doing is trading bigger portions of your life for smaller returns of money. And that's not wealth, that's survival. Wealth begins the moment you learn to earn beyond labor. You start building a system where money works for you instead of only you working for money. When I first heard that idea, it startled me. I grew up believing that the only way to get ahead was to work harder, longer, faster. But then someone pointed out, if hard work alone made people wealthy, then every construction worker, every farmhand, every laborer would be a millionaire, and they're not. Why? Because wealth doesn't come from labor alone. It comes from leverage, ownership, and vision. Think about an investment. You put in $1, and with time and the right place to plant it, that dollar begins to grow. It doesn't ask for lunch breaks. It doesn't sleep. It doesn't call in sick. That dollar keeps working 24 hours a day. Now imagine you've got 100 of those little workers, or 1,000. While you rest, they're out there producing dividends, interest, returns. That's how the wealthy step out of the trap of trading time for money. They send their money out to work harder than they ever could. I remember starting my first side venture, something small that didn't make much at first. But the idea was never about the immediate payout. It was about creating something that could grow whether I was at the desk or not. That small seed taught me the principle. Profits, royalties, dividends. These are streams that flow while you sleep. And even a trickle, if you give it time, can turn into a river. Some of you may say, but I don't have the capital to start. Let me tell you, capital is important, but it isn't the starting point. The starting point is the mindset. Even if you begin with a book that pays a small royalty, or a simple product you sell online, or a bit of money placed consistently into an index fund, you're training yourself to earn beyond labor. You're shifting from being the worker to being the architect of a system that multiplies itself. So don't fall into the trap of believing your income must always be tied to your hours. Hours are limited. But creativity, strategy, and the power of compounded effort are unlimited. The day you decide to send your money, your ideas, and your systems to work for you is the day you step off the treadmill and begin building wealth that lasts. If you want to understand one of the most overlooked secrets of wealth, it's this. Live poor now so you can live rich later. And I don't mean live poor in the sense of lacking ambition or staying stuck in mediocrity. I mean practice discipline, practice restraint, and make the temporary sacrifices that buy you permanent freedom down the road. The poor mindset spends everything it gets the moment it arrives. The wealthy mindset understands that you can either have comfort today or freedom tomorrow, but rarely both at the same time in the beginning. I remember when I first started out, my income was barely enough to cover the essentials. And at that point, the temptation was to say, well, since I can't save much, I might as well spend it all and at least enjoy myself. That kind of thinking feels good in the moment, but it keeps you locked in place for a lifetime. Instead, I began to cut back. Not forever, just for a season. I skipped the unnecessary purchases, said no to the upgrades, delayed the vacations. Was it fun? Not always. Was it easy? Absolutely not. But was it worth it? 1,000 times yes. Because while others were chasing short-term pleasures, I was quietly building long-term freedom. You see, every dollar you deny yourself today isn't a loss. It's an investment. Skip the $50 dinner and redirect that $50 into an investment account. That one choice, left alone for years, could turn into hundreds. Skip the newest gadget and use that money to buy a dividend stock. That stock doesn't just give you something shiny for a season. It gives you income year after year. Those aren't sacrifices, they're trades. You're trading momentary comfort for a lifetime of abundance. The problem is, most people don't see the trade because they're focused on the weekend, not the decade. They think saving means losing out. But you're not losing, you're buying your future. Every dollar you invest is a ticket to freedom, to options, to saying no when others have to say yes. That's why the rich endure discomfort now. They're not punishing themselves, they're planting seeds, and seeds take time before they show fruit. I've seen this principle play out in countless lives. Someone earns a modest income but lives with humility, always putting aside a portion, always investing. Years later, while others are still scrambling paycheck to paycheck, that person is enjoying the fruits of financial independence. On the other hand, I've seen high earners who spent every cent as it came in. They lived rich today but stayed poor tomorrow. And that's the tragedy, mistaking lifestyle for wealth. So make the choice. Don't seek all your comfort now. Endure a little discomfort, a little restraint, a little patience. Live below your means today, and one day you'll find yourself living not just rich in money, but rich in freedom, in options, and in peace of mind. A paycheck is a wonderful thing. It puts food on the table, pays the bills, and provides a sense of stability. But if all you ever work for is a paycheck, you'll find yourself limited by what someone else decides your time is worth. A paycheck makes you a living, but a plan makes you wealthy. And that's the difference. The job may cover your needs today, but it will never buy you freedom tomorrow. Freedom doesn't come from wages. It comes from a plan. I remember when I was first getting started, I thought the answer was simply to work harder. More hours, more effort, more hustle. And yes, working harder increased the paycheck, but it also left me exhausted and still capped, because no matter how many hours I gave, I couldn't escape the fact that my income was tied to time. Then I learned the real key. Don't abandon the paycheck, but use it to fuel a bigger plan. Let the job be the foundation, but build something on top of it that belongs to you. See, the paycheck is what you work for, but the plan is what works for you. A plan means you're creating something that outlives your daily grind. It could be a product you design once and sell 100 times. It could be a service you build into a system, so it runs without you. It could be an investment that pays dividends, or real estate that earns rent while you sleep. That's the beauty of a plan. It doesn't clock out when you do. Let me give you an example. I once met a man who worked as a school teacher. His paycheck was modest, but he didn't stop there. On the side, he started writing study guides, then selling them. What began as a small project soon turned into a steady stream of income. Before long, those guides were making him more than his salary. The paycheck made a living, but the plan made him wealthy. Now, you don't have to quit your job tomorrow. Keep it if you must. Honor the paycheck. It provides stability. But don't stop there. Start small. Maybe it's a weekend service. Maybe it's selling an idea. Maybe it's investing a portion of your income. Whatever it is, let it be something that builds on itself, something that multiplies without depending entirely on your hours, because when your plan starts to pay, that's when life changes. The danger is when people think, I'll just work hard at my job and hope it's enough. But hoping isn't a plan. Wages alone will never set you free. It's the plan, clear, consistent, patiently built, that will do it. So don't just work for a paycheck, work for a plan. Because a paycheck sustains you for a week, but a plan sustains you for a lifetime. Income is important. It keeps the lights on. It puts food on the table, and it pays for the daily necessities of life. But income alone will never make you free. Income feeds you, but assets free you. That's the great distinction. Most people spend their whole lives chasing income, thinking the answer is always to earn more, only to discover that the treadmill never stops. The wealthy, on the other hand, play a different game. They don't just look at what comes in this week or this month. They focus on building something that lasts. Assets. Assets are the things that work for you long after you've stopped working for them. The trap many fall into is confusing liabilities with assets. The poor and middle class often spend their extra income on things that look impressive but drain resources, expensive cars, the latest gadgets, bigger houses than they need. Those are liabilities because they take money out of your pocket every month instead of putting money in. The wealthy learn to delay those purchases and focus instead on acquiring assets. Stocks that grow and pay dividends, rental properties that generate steady income, small businesses that can expand far beyond their own effort. These assets are seeds planted today that bear fruit for years to come. I learned this lesson when I was young and broke. At first, I thought more income was the answer, so I chased opportunities that gave me quick cash. But the money slipped through my fingers just as fast as it came in, because I was buying things that didn't last. It wasn't until a mentor explained the difference between income and assets that my thinking shifted. He said, "You're working for money, but money itself could be working for you if only you'd let it." That was a revelation. From that moment, I made a decision. Every time I earned $1, I would ask, how much of this can I turn into an asset? Not just how much can I spend, but how much can I put into something that grows? Think of it this way. If you only work for income, you'll always need to keep working. The moment you stop, the money stops. But when you build assets, the game changes. A well-placed investment continues to earn whether you show up or not. Rental property doesn't take weekends off. Dividends don't ask if you're tired. A small business can continue producing even when you're asleep. That's freedom, when the money starts working harder than you do. So if you want wealth that lasts, don't just ask, how can I earn more? Ask, what can I own that will keep earning even when I don't? Because income pays the bills, but assets pay for freedom. And freedom, my friends, is the ultimate return on investment. Wealth is not built on luck, and it's not built on some grand event that happens once in a lifetime. Wealth is built on discipline. And discipline, if you truly want it to work for you, must be treated like a religion, something sacred, something non-negotiable, something you don't put aside when it's inconvenient. Poverty, on the other hand, is built on neglect. Small neglects, repeated daily, lead to massive losses over time. The difference between the rich and the poor is often nothing more than who chose discipline and who chose neglect. Financial discipline begins with the simple rule, save before you spend. Most people reverse it. They spend first, save if anything's left. But the truth is, nothing is ever left when you operate that way. Money will always find a way to disappear if you give it the chance. The wealthy flip the order. They save first, invest next, and then spend from what remains. That small shift in philosophy can change everything. When I first heard the idea, I didn't believe it would matter. I thought, what difference will a few dollars saved make? But when I tried it, something remarkable happened. I began to see the pattern of discipline forming, and that pattern changed my identity. I wasn't just someone trying to make ends meet anymore. I was someone building wealth, no matter how small the beginnings. Invest before you splurge. That's another law of discipline. It's not that you can't enjoy life, but enjoyment comes after the investment, not before. Too many people flip that order as well. They splurge now, hoping someday they'll invest, but someday never comes. When you make it a rule that every time money comes in, a portion goes into an investment first, you train your mind to value the future more than the present. And when the future finally arrives, you'll be glad you made the trade. I've watched friends and colleagues take different paths with the same opportunities. Some treated their income casually, neglecting to save or invest, and ended up with little to show for years of hard work. Others treated financial discipline like a religion. 10% always saved, another 10% invested, expenses tracked carefully, indulgences delayed until they were earned. Decades later, the difference between the two paths was staggering. One group lived in regret, the other in freedom. And here's the truth. It doesn't take brilliance to be wealthy. It doesn't take perfect timing or being born into the right family. It takes discipline. Small, consistent acts of saving, investing, and delaying gratification. Wealth is not the result of one big decision, but of many little ones, practiced faithfully like rituals. So guard your disciplines fiercely, write them down, repeat them daily, and treat them as sacred rules. Because wealth is built on disciplines, and neglect is the surest road to poverty. Most people live their lives based on goals that sound good, but don't hold up under pressure. They say, one day I'll be debt-free, or someday I'll start investing. But goals without standards are nothing more than wishes, and wishes have no power. The difference between those who struggle financially and those who build wealth is not the size of their goals, but the firmness of their standards. The broke say, I'll save if I can, while the wealthy say, I save no matter what. That small but crucial shift transforms everything. You see, goals inspire you, but standards govern you. A goal says, I want to read more books. A standard says, I read 10 pages every day, whether I feel like it or not. A goal says, I want to save for retirement. A standard says, I save 10% of every paycheck. No excuses. Standards turn your future from a hope into an inevitability. They are non-negotiables, lines you refuse to cross. And once they are set, they begin to shape your identity. You stop saying, I'm trying to save, and start saying, I'm the kind of person who always saves. That's a whole different world. When I was young and struggling, I had plenty of goals. I wanted more money, a nicer home, better opportunities. But it wasn't until I turned those vague desires into concrete standards that my life began to change. I made a decision that 10% of every dollar I earned would be saved. Another 10% would be invested, and at least 30 minutes a day would be spent in learning. These weren't goals I'd chase when it was convenient. They became rules I lived by. And life began to bend to those rules. Opportunities started opening. My finances gained structure, and my confidence grew because I was no longer at the mercy of chance. The trouble with only setting goals is that they rely on how you feel. And feelings are unreliable. Some days you'll feel motivated, other days you won't. But standards are not dependent on moods. They're commitments you make to yourself that hold steady through ups and downs. It's like brushing your teeth. You don't wait until you feel inspired to do it. You just do it. And because you do it daily, the results compound. I've watched people with big dreams, but no standards live in constant frustration. They wanted success, but their daily actions didn't align with their vision. And I've also watched people with modest goals, but rock-solid standards quietly surpass everyone else. Because standards, not wishes, build momentum. So don't just write down goals and hope they happen. Decide your minimums, how much you'll save, how much you'll earn, how much you'll invest, and treat those as sacred, because goals give you direction, but standards give you destiny. Most people live their lives in a very short window of time. They think in days, sometimes weeks, maybe months at best. Their horizon is Friday, the weekend, the next paycheck, the next small pleasure. And because their focus is so narrow, their results are equally small. But the wealthy think in decades. They understand that true freedom isn't built overnight. It's built through consistent, deliberate action, stretched across years. They don't ask, what can I get by Friday? They ask, what kind of life will I have built by 10 years from now? I remember when I first started learning about wealth, my eyes were fixed on immediate needs, pay the bills, catch up on debt, maybe buy something nice when I had a little extra. But then I met people who were thinking differently. They weren't worried about Friday night. They were planting seeds for 10, 20, even 30 years down the road. At first, I thought it seemed too slow. Who wants to wait that long? But then I realized something important. The 10 years were going to pass anyway. The only question was whether I'd arrive at that future with something to show for it or with nothing but regret. When you stretch your horizon, your choices change. If you only think about Friday, you'll spend your paycheck on entertainment, convenience, or impulse. But if you think about 10 years, you'll save, you'll invest, you'll educate yourself, you'll endure short-term discomfort because you see the bigger picture. It's the same principle a farmer lives by. He doesn't plant a seed in the morning and expect a harvest by dinner. He knows it takes seasons of care, patience, and discipline. Wealth works the same way. It compounds quietly at first, then suddenly it's too big to ignore. I once decided to set a 10-year vision. I asked myself, if I keep doing what I'm doing now, where will I be in a decade? And if I change, if I save consistently, if I invest wisely, if I keep learning daily, where could I be? That exercise alone shifted how I spent my hours. Suddenly, skipping a mindless purchase didn't feel like a loss. It felt like buying my freedom. Reading a book wasn't just passing time. It was an investment in who I was becoming. Thinking in decades gave meaning to what seemed like small, ordinary choices. And here's the beauty. Once you adopt a decade mindset, each day becomes powerful. You don't have to accomplish everything today. You just have to do something today that aligns with your long-term vision. One investment, one saved dollar, one page read, one relationship nurtured. Over a decade, those small acts accumulate into something extraordinary. So stop asking what you can get by Friday. Start asking what you can build by 10 years from now. Because the poor think about days, but the wealthy think about decades. And decades are where freedom lives. If you build wealth without character, you're building on sand. It may look solid for a while, but the first storm will wash it away. And storms always come. Markets crash, businesses shift, partnerships change. If your foundation isn't anchored in integrity, responsibility, and service, whatever you've built won't last. I've seen it time and again. Someone makes a fast fortune, but because their character couldn't carry the weight, it crumbles, and they end up with less than they started. Wealth without character doesn't just disappear. It takes the person down with it. I learned early in my journey that money is a magnifier. It doesn't change you, it reveals you. If you're careless with $10, you'll be reckless with $10,000. If you cut corners when the stakes are small, you'll betray trust when the stakes are high. That's why building character first is so critical. Wealth is attracted to stewardship. People want to do business with someone they can trust, someone who honors their word, someone who shows up responsibly, even in the little things. Take honesty. If people know they can trust you, opportunities will find you. If people doubt you, no amount of money will keep the doors open for long. Or responsibility, That means handling what you have now with care, even if it's little. I've met folks who said, if I had more money, I'd be responsible. But responsibility isn't something you turn on later. It's something you practice now with what you already have. And then there's service. The wealthy understand that money follows value. If your focus is only on what you can take, you'll eventually run dry. But if your focus is on how you can serve, how you can add value, wealth has a way of finding you and staying with you. I remember a man I met years ago who built a strong business, but he did it by cutting corners and making promises he didn't keep. For a time, it looked like he had everything: big house, new cars, the works. But little by little, the cracks showed. Clients stopped trusting him. Partners pulled away. Within a few years, the whole thing collapsed, and so did his reputation. He hadn't lost just money, he'd lost trust, credibility, and peace of mind. And once those are gone, money alone can't buy them back. On the other hand, I've watched people with modest beginnings who built slowly, anchored in principles. They kept their word when it was hard. They took care of what was entrusted to them. They thought long-term about relationships, not just short-term about profits. And over time, their wealth grew, but more importantly, it lasted. Why? Because their character could carry it. So, before you chase money, build yourself. Work harder on your integrity than your income. Strengthen your responsibility before you expand your reach. Anchor everything you do in service. Because money may come and go, but when character is your foundation, wealth, true wealth, will last. Let me tell you something that changed the way I thought about success. Wealthy minds are recorded minds. If you want to capture wisdom, if you want to build wealth that lasts, you have to write things down. Don't trust your memory alone. It's far too short, and it's filled with distractions. The difference between someone who drifts through life and someone who directs their life often comes down to one habit: journaling. The poor try to keep it all in their head. The wealthy put it on paper where it becomes clear, structured, and actionable. I remember when I first started keeping a journal. It wasn't fancy, just a simple notebook. But inside it, I began writing my goals, my daily lessons, and even my mistakes. And here's what I discovered. When you write something down, you not only capture it, you clarify it. A thought in your head is vague, slippery, easy to forget. But when you put it on paper, it becomes concrete. A goal in your head is just a wish. A goal on paper becomes a plan. That's the power of journaling. It transforms the abstract into the actionable. If you're serious about wealth, write down your financial targets. Don't just say, I want to be rich one day. That's too vague. Say, I want to save $10,000 this year. Or, I will invest 20% of my income every month. Track it. Document your progress. And when you fall short, write that down too. Not to condemn yourself, but to learn. Reflection turns experiences into wisdom, but only if you record them. Otherwise, you risk repeating the same mistakes over and over. Another powerful use of a journal is capturing ideas. Ideas are like seeds. They don't always look like much when they first appear, but with time, they can grow into opportunities that change your life. How many times have you had a good idea, thought you'd remember it, and then forgot it completely? I know I have. That's why I made it a discipline to write them down immediately. Some of my best business insights came from casual observations I would have lost if I hadn't captured them in my journal. And then there's the practice of recording gratitude. It's easy to get so caught up in chasing wealth that you forget to appreciate what you already have. When you write down what you're thankful for, you train your mind to focus on abundance rather than scarcity. That shift in perspective doesn't just make you happier, it makes you wiser with money. Because when you appreciate what you have, you manage it better. I've gone back and read journals from years ago and been amazed at the lessons I had forgotten, the mistakes I had overcome, and the growth I had made. Without that record, those treasures of wisdom would have been lost. So don't leave your success to chance or your memory. Write it down. Because the act of journaling doesn't just record your journey, it shapes it. Gratitude is more than a polite thank you. Gratitude is a perspective. And perspective is everything when it comes to wealth and success. I've met people with very little money who lived rich lives because they practiced gratitude. I've also met people with plenty of money who lived poor lives because they were never satisfied, never thankful, never grounded. Gratitude doesn't just change how you feel, it changes how you see. And how you see determines how you act. If you're constantly looking at what you don't have, you'll operate from fear, scarcity, and comparison. But if you train yourself to focus on what you do have, you'll make decisions from a place of abundance, clarity, and strength. That's how gratitude becomes fuel. When I first began working on myself, I thought gratitude was something you practiced only when things were going well. But I quickly learned that gratitude is most important when things aren't going well. It's easy to be grateful when the money is flowing, when opportunities are opening, when life feels smooth. The challenge and the real power comes when you can still say thank you in the middle of setbacks, when you can appreciate the lesson in the struggle, when you can be grateful for the small beginnings. That kind of perspective keeps you grounded when things are hard and keeps you humble when things are good. One of the most practical ways I learned to practice gratitude was by writing it down daily. 3 things. That's it. Not in a fancy way, not for anyone else to read, just a quick note in a journal. I'm grateful for this lesson I learned today. I'm grateful for this person who encouraged me. I'm grateful for the chance to start over. What happens is you begin to train your mind to scan for what's good instead of only noticing what's wrong. And over time, that habit rewires the way you see the world. Instead of focusing on obstacles, you begin seeing opportunities. Instead of complaining about problems, you look for solutions. That shift doesn't just make you feel better, it makes you act better. I remember times when I was struggling financially, tempted to make short-sighted decisions out of fear. Gratitude gave me the patience to wait for the right opportunity instead of grabbing at the wrong one. Gratitude reminded me that I already had enough to survive. And from that place of calm, I could think strategically about how to grow. Without that perspective, I might have chased fast money, cut corners, or burned relationships. Gratitude kept me anchored. As your wealth grows, gratitude becomes even more critical. Money has a way of tempting people into arrogance, into thinking they don't need anyone else, or into forgetting the sacrifices that got them there. Gratitude keeps you sharp. It reminds you that your success isn't built on you alone. It's built on the teachers, the mentors, the clients, the employees, and the opportunities that came your way. Gratitude keeps you generous, and generosity keeps you in the flow of abundance. So don't just feel grateful, practice it. Write it, speak it, live it. Gratitude will not only ground you, it will fuel you to go further than you ever imagined.